It's smiling at me. Okay? Beautiful. Yeah, yes.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at Chinese turkey, aka Peking Duck. Something that I've always wanted to try making, and something that relies heavily on the Chinese 5-spice mixture, that of cinnamon, clove, star anise, fennel seed, and Szechuan peppercorn. You can buy this stuff pre-ground, but as usual with most dried spices, it's going to benefit from being toasted and freshly ground. So that's just what we're going to do. We're going to toast these in a dry skillet until fragrant, take out the cinnamon sticks and give them a good smash, dump everything into our dedicated spice grinder. This is not used for grinding coffee, and grind to a fine powder. Now you can keep this in your spice rack and it will taste worlds better than any of the pre-ground stuff. Next up, a marinade for the cavity of the duck, which is pretty much just hoisin sauce. In a medium bowl, combine 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of honey, a small knob of freshly grated ginger, and a single clove of freshly grated garlic, 2 teaspoons of seasoned rice vinegar, 2 teaspoons of sesame seed oil. If this sauce gets too thin, you can add cornstarch to thicken, but not until after we've added our thickening agents. That is, a tablespoon of chili garlic sauce, 2 tablespoons of smooth peanut butter, a few solid pinches of our 5-spice mixture, a good twist of freshly ground pepper, and maybe 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Whisk to combine, and again add cornstarch as necessary. Now, for the faint of heart, you might want to look away because we've got a head-on young Peking duck, into whose cavity we're going to dump about maybe half of the hoisin sauce, and then we're going to stitch the cavity closed using a bamboo skewer. As you can see, I'm sort of wrapping the skin around the skewer for each stitch. Now, for what was certainly the weirdest part of my day, I am fitting the tip of an air compressor hose with the finger of a rubber glove that I've cut a hole into like a very, very ineffective prophylactic, shoving into the neck skin of the duck and cranking the compressor on, inflating the duck and separating the skin from the meat, which is going to allow the fat to better render and give us crispier, browner skin. Next up, we need to scald the duck in a mixture of about 4 cups of water, maybe a 1/4 cup of soy sauce, and a few of our whole Chinese 5-spice spices. Bring to a boil, carefully hold the duck over top, and ladle across the skin until it starts to take on a nice golden color and the skin tightens up considerably. Now, ideally, you want this guy to rest in the fridge uncovered for at least 1 day and up to 3, but if you're like me and you had the idea for this episode the day before it airs, we need a shortcut, and a very effective way to rapidly dry skin is with a hair dryer. It's also an opportunity to pull out any stray feathers that the butcher might have missed. Now it's time to roast at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 to 1.5 hours. While the bird roasts, it's time to make some Mandarin-style pancakes. We're going to add 2/3 of a cup of boiling water to 10 ounces of plain all-purpose flour. Mix until a shaggy dough forms, turn out onto a floured worktop, and knead until smooth and supple. Roll into a 2-inch log and divide into 24 pieces, each of which we're then going to divide again in half, and keeping the other pieces under plastic wrap until we're ready to use them. Roll out to about a 3-inch round, both pieces on a well-floured work surface, and then brush one side with sesame seed oil, very, very light film of sesame seed oil. Sandwich the two together and roll out to a 7 to 9-inch pancake, which, kind of like a fresh tortilla, we're going to toast in a dry pan until light brown spots form. Once all the pancakes are done, it's time to retrieve our duck. Now, this guy did not turn out as evenly browned as a traditional Peking duck because it had not been allowed to air dry overnight. But the skin is still super crisp and the meat is nice and juicy, and the head smiling as ever. Now it's time to simply carve the duck, remove the wings and legs, and then slice the breast meat into about 1/2-inch slices. You'll have to forgive my haste, but this is the first thing I've eaten all day and my whole apartment has been smelling like duck and spices for hours now. Fill up a pancake with duck, thinly sliced cucumber and scallions, and then top with a bit of our reserved hoisin sauce. Now again, air drying the duck overnight or up to 3 days is going to give you darker skin and more flavorful meat, but as far as shortcuts go, this one is a keeper.
He brought everything back, all the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast.
What do you say we make us some roast beast? I'm going to start by making a stuffing. I have some apple sage pork sausage here that I'm going to bust up and brown down, aka break it up into little tiny pieces, place it in a non-stick skillet, and cook to a lovely golden brown. We're not going to worry about fond in this case because it's a non-stick pan and there's nothing to deglaze. Instead, we're just going to throw in our aromatics. I've got some red onion and chopped celery here. We're just going to sweat these for 3 or 4 minutes until they are soft and translucent. See how high we can toss them in the air to try and impress our internet audience? And now it's time to address the figurative meat of our stuffing, the bread. I'm going to go with these day-old cornbread muffins. Not only are they going to have the perfect consistency, but all that extra exterior surface area is going to help them retain their shape. Now it's time to mix it all together, and I am not repeating mistakes of yore. I have an appropriately large-sized bowl ready to go. And into this, we're dumping about 5 cups of cornbread, our aromatics, our sausage, and maybe a cup and a half of chicken stock. And then because the center of the roast beast looked pretty red, I'm going to try and up the red content with some cranberries. By now, I'm sure you're wondering, what is the roast beast? Well, I submit that it is a turkey. And obviously it's a cartoon animal, but it's got legs, wings, and it's boneless. So I'm thinking that by deboning the majority of the turkey, but leaving the wings and legs intact, and then making a roulade with our boneless turkey, we'll at least have a visually close approximation. So as you can see, starting at the backbone on one side of the turkey, I'm making shallow cuts around the carcass, trying to remove as much meat as possible until I hit the breastbone. Then I'm going to repeat on the other side, again stopping right before I hit the breastbone, and then being very careful because there's no meat between the breastbone and the skin, and it's important not to pierce the skin here because it's going to be the top of our roulade. Just keep making careful, shallow cuts until you have emancipated the carcass. And right here you've got the perfect thing to make stock for gravy. There's a ton of cartilage, meat, and bone. And while I'm leaving the bones in the drumsticks, I'm going to remove the thigh bone. To do that, you need to cut down the length of the bone, find the joint, worm your knife in between the bones, and there you go. Sometimes it helps to scrape down the side of the bone like this so you can find the joint more easily. Then once I've got the second thigh bone out of there, I'm going to repeat for the first wing bones. I know I'm not being terribly thorough, so go check out Chef John's video for how to debone a whole turkey. The last step we're going to do is place some diagonal cuts on the breasts and unfold them up toward the neck so we have a bit more even dispersion of meat. And if your meat's looking particularly craggy like mine, I'm going to go ahead and give it a good pound with a meat mallet or a fry pan, and then it's time to stuff. And most importantly, remember that we forgot to season with kosher salt and freshly ground pepper. Remove the stuffing and get that out of the way. Make sure it is coated generously and evenly all over before piling in the stuffing of your choice, or you might end up with a pretty bland turkey roulade. And after all this work and how pretty it's going to turn out, that would be a real shame. So now we're going to fold the turkey onto itself like big meaty French doors, and then it's time to start a tying. Place butcher knots or slip knots or whatever bullshit knot I'm tying right now at 1-inch intervals up the length of the bird, tying around the thighs particularly tightly because we want them closer to the body, just so they cook a little bit more evenly. Then I'm going to tie the drumsticks together, snip off the excess twine, season the exterior liberally with kosher salt and freshly ground pepper. I don't want a bland bite in this bird. And then I'm going to hit the whole thing with a little bit of vegetable oil. This is going to help the skin brown more quickly, since this tom is going to spend less time in the oven than a traditional turkey, because it's smaller, and that's how heat works. But much like a spatchcock turkey, I'm going to tuck the wingtips underneath the body and wrap the ends of the drumsticks in a little bit of foil. This is just going to help them to keep from burning. And look at that, it kind of looks like the roast beast, doesn't it? And now we got to do the roasting part at 450 degrees for 15 minutes, and then turning the temperature down to 350 Fahrenheit and roasting for an additional hour and a half to 2 hours, until the thickest part of the stuffing registers 155. Now we're just going to remove this guy from the rack here. I don't know, it's kind of a two-man job here. I wish I had a little bit of help. Oh my god, you guys, look who it is. It's Rashid. He came all the way downtown just to help me get the turkey out of the thing. So with our 2 tongs working as one, we're going to put this on a cooling rack for about 30 minutes. Thanks for helping me out, Rashid. I miss knowing that you are sleeping just down the hall from me. Anyway, like I said, 30 minutes, we're letting this guy rest. We want those meat fibers to relax and for the internal temperature to rise to 165. Then, for the first time in a long time, we are resurrecting the cross-section. And what a cross-section it is. It's like a whole Thanksgiving dinner. And now, little who's, before we can feast, all that's left to do is carve the roast beast. I'm not sure what that was an impression of, but whatever. We're hitting this guy with a little bit of gravy that we made from the stock that we made from the carcass. If you want to see how to make turkey stock, check out the link in the upper right hand corner right now. And we got ourselves an obvious Clean Plate Club member here. Juicy meat, crisp skin, and holiday cheer all in one rolled up package. Hey guys, as we approach the holidays, our dietary requirements for meat and cheese are elevated to dangerous levels, prompting many hosts to furnish their guests with ornate platters of their favorite savory snacks. These spreads might seem a little intimidating, but as you'll discover, there are very few ways that you can mess up charcuterie, except to call it charcuterie, which throngs of angry internet commenters will be quick to remind you refers only to meat. Let's get down to basics. Alright folks, so let's start with cheese and some of their different flavor profiles. Over here we have Parmesan, y'all know my man Parmesan, salty, sweet, waxy, and just a little nutty. Then down below we have what I think is the French cousin to Parmesan, Mimolette. It's cool looking, sweet, nutty, and expensive. Then over here we are headed to Spain with a little bit of Manchego, a firm, sharp, and somewhat sour cheese, and perfect for pairing with cured meat. Then we have a hunk of Robiola, or Brie's cousin that never takes a shower. This stuff smells like slow death, but has a surprisingly sweet and mild flavor. Then next up, everybody's most or least favorite, goat cheese. This is a soft, ripened goat cheese, so it's a little creamier and more flavorful than your average chev. Then on the opposite end of the goat spectrum, we have an aged goat Gouda. This little guy is 18 months old and has lost the distinct goat flavor in favor of sweeter and nuttier overtones. Then right behind it, we have the more recognizable cow's milk Gouda, which given its age would be normally sharp and salty, but this is a double cream Gouda, so you can actually see how much softer and creamier it is. It's very sweet and nutty, so it goes really well with sweet and nutty things. Then next door, we've got my favorite form that goat cheese can take, Midnight Moon, a 6-month-old goat cheese that is sweet, buttery, and lightly crystalline, so you're going to get a little bit of crunch throughout its soft texture. Moving on over here, we've got a classic aged Irish cheddar. You guys have probably had this before, but it's my cameraman's favorite, so we had to get it. It is sharp, firm, but slightly creamy, and goes great with damn near anything. Now over here we have what's pretty much an American brie, Mount Tam by Cowgirl Creamery, an incredibly soft, buttery, luxurious, melt-in-your-mouth triple cream cheese that even brie haters will love. Speaking of cheeses that people will love despite normally having an aversion to said cheeses, whatever. Over here we have something called Gorgonzola Dolce, a milder, sweeter, creamier version of its moldy Italian, French, and British counterparts. And then lastly something a little less exotic, ricotta. Sorry, ricotta. Sweet, creamy, mild, and slightly granular. It's got just as much a place on your cheese board as it does in your lasagna, and we'll see why. So this is obviously a very small smattering of the endless cheese options out there, but hopefully it paints a picture of some of the basic genres and gives you a few ideas for your next classy night in. Next up, someone better call Arby's, because it appears as though we have the meats, and way better ones too. Up front we've got some hard cured stuff like this peppercorn sopressata, which is going to have a lot of funk from the aging process and a little bit of heat from the peppercorns. Of course you're going to want to have your butcher slice this and virtually everything else paper thin, but some things you just gotta slice yourself, like this fennel salami, which is likely going to be a little bit more sour, a little less funky, but bear in mind cured meat flavors are going to vary wildly depending on their producer, region, and about a billion other factors. Over here though we've got a cured chorizo, which based off its color alone is probably going to be more spice forward with a bit of smoke and aged funk. For either of these joints you're gonna want to take off the casing. Yes, it is perfectly edible, delicious pig intestine, but it has a texture that's practically reminiscent of dried out pig intestine. It's really chewy, and it's just going to be easier on your guests to peel it off like so. Then once you've got the casing off, go ahead and slice off a couple exemplary slices to show your guests, yes, it's okay, cut a piece off, eat it, that's what this is here for. Don't ask me why, but sometimes dinner guests need a little encouragement like that. Now we're going to head back in time to before we sliced up that salami, weird, and talk about the pre-sliced meats before me. Over here we've got a classic prosciutto San Daniele, sorry, I don't know why that keeps happening, prosciutto San Daniele, whose salty, oily, tangy, crudo flavors are contrasted here with prosciutto cotto, which is the same cut that has not been cured but simply cooked. Then over yonder we have my favorite thing in the world, mortadella, or bologna for grown-ups. It is fatty, salty, porky, and thanks to the inclusion of some nuts, nutty. Sorry. Anyway, it's really good and you should eat some. Then next to that we have my other favorite thing in the world, speck. This is prosciutto that has been smoked. So in addition to all that oily, tangy, aged flavor, it has smoke. So beyond cured and cooked meats like these, there's a whole world of pâtés and terrines, all different kinds of ways that you can bring tasty protein to the party. But even all these studs need a wingman, and here to fill that role are all these delicious accoutrements. Starting on the far right, we've got Marcona almonds fried in olive oil. These are way crunchier and more flavorful than regular almonds, and they are worth the extra cost. Then we've got these darling little pickles, known as cornichons, and they're delicious. Put one in your mouth, see what happens. And then we come to the matter of olives. I like Niçoise olives, which have a more savory and less harsh flavor than regular. Be sure you check these little things for pits. If, like me, you're not a frequent olive eater, sometimes you forget. Let's try another one of these here. And careful, much better. And then flanking the Niçoise, we have our grocer's choice mixed olives, which, you know, are nice to have. Then over on the nutty side of things, we have some smoked almonds. These are going to come in handy if you're serving strong, imposing cheeses that need something with a little kick to remind your guests that they are still alive. Then back here, we've got some artichoke hearts packed with oil and herbs. These are great on their own, but go even better with a little bit of fresh mozzarella. Then heading back around clockwise, we've got some orange marmalade here. It's very bitter and bright, and it's one of a million ways that you can introduce fruit fruit onto your board of meaty, cheesy delights. It's going to go really nicely with brie or goat cheese or taleggio. Then we have a condiment that I think should be served at all tables alongside salt and pepper, caramelized onion jam. You can make this yourself, but it's perfectly good out of the jar, as is its neighbor over here, a little sun-dried tomato puree. Not all this stuff is going to be available anywhere you go, so go to your grocer and mix and match. Like, I hadn't seen this before, some grilled cipollini onions. They had some, so I bought some, and now I'm eating them. It is the meat and cheese board circle of life. And lastly, I know this is pretty hipster, but we have some spicy honey. There's a reason that this stuff has caught on over the past few years. It is delicious, and it's going to be especially good on a ricotta. Maybe with a few of those Marcona almonds if we're feeling frisky. And then I almost forgot about some fresh Mission figs. This will go really nice with any of the sweet, creamy cheeses. There you have it. We got our wingmen. Now, who's driving? The vehicles that will be driving our taste buds to Flavor Town are usually going to be just bread or crackers. We generally don't want anything too flavorful or herby. I'm going with a simply sliced baguette and some salted crackers. We've got some high quality ingredients going onto our board, and we don't want them overshadowed by roast garlic, rosemary, 4 cheese, Asiago limited edition Triscuits. Anyway, it's time for the big payoff, laying out our cheese and charcuterie board. You don't have to go into this with too much rhyme or reason. I'm just going to sort of localize different meats and cheeses by their varying levels of sweet and savory. I'm putting the sweet stuff towards the center, so we've got some ricotta and gorgonzola dolce. I've got parmesan, pickles, and speck on my left. Some artichoke hearts near the parmesan, because I think that's what's going to go best with. Smoked almonds by the Midnight Moon and grilled onions right near the artichoke hearts. The triple cream up front with a healthy scoop of caramelized onion jam and figs. And then let's fill in the gaps with things that are probably going to be eaten on their own: nuts, fruits, and olives. And there you have it, one hell of a meat and cheese board. You don't have to be culturally or regionally specific. You don't have to be a city planner to lay one out. You've just got to experiment, try some new things, and see what you like. And I guarantee your guests will follow your example.
I told them your candy was absolutely indescribable.
Hey, Jen, do we know that lady? Maybe. Isn't she the woman who lives below you and has sex really loud?
All right, I'll do it just this once, but you can't tell anybody.
Yes, yes, please, just give it to me.
Yeah, that's her.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I forgot to record my sort of walk-on introduction thing, so we're going to recycle this one from last week's episode. Let's take a look at these oxtails. Perfect. And now we can start making Monica's candy from Friends, which I always imagined as a chewy caramel covered in chocolate. So in a medium saucepan, we are combining 60 grams of water, 155 grams of light corn syrup, and 400 grams of granulated sugar, which we're going to place over medium-high heat, stirring minimally with every intention of bringing up to 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Once 320 is reached, we're going to kill the heat and start streaming in a mixture of butter and cream. 230 grams of butter melted into 230 grams of cream, adding a little bit at a time, whisking constantly, and then once everything's added, we're going to return the caramel over medium-high heat and cook until we get it back up to 240 to 245 degrees Fahrenheit, the softball stage. 240 if you want a softer caramel, 245 if you want a chewier caramel. Then we're adding just a little dash of vanilla extract and a whole lot of dashes of kosher salt. I mean, salted caramel. You ever heard of it? Whisk to combine, and then we're pouring it into a prepared baking dish of some kind. I've got a square one here that has both been liberally greased with nonstick spray and lined with parchment paper. Once poured, it must be cooled completely. I'm talking at least 6 hours. Only then can we even consider turning out and cutting into our desired shapes. I'm hitting both sides of a sheet of parchment paper with nonstick spray set in a rim baking sheet to receive said shapes, and I had just enough foresight to use this tin that has a removable bottom for easy extraction. We're going to invert our block O caramels onto a greasy surface, remove the plate and parchment paper, and then we can begin scoring and cutting. A supposedly precise process that I did pretty imprecisely. After greasing up my knife, I carefully measured and scored perfectly square caramels, but once I got down to actually cutting them, I just kinda eyeballed it. This is homemade candy after all, it should look kinda homemade, right? So once everybody has been cut into cubes, it's time to coat them in chocolate, which means we must tangle with the arch nemesis of all great British baking show contestants, tempering. The act of melting and then recrystallizing chocolate so that it holds its shape at room temperature. We're gonna start by chopping up a whole mess of dark chocolate, which we're going to place in a large glass bowl, which we're then going to place over a pot of not quite simmering water. The objective here is to simply melt the chocolate completely. Stir it constantly, make sure that your water does not boil, and bring it up to a temperature of about 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we're going to take it off the heat and seed it. That is, we're going to add a lesser amount of very finely chopped unmelted chocolate. This is both going to cool down our melted chocolate and encourage it to recrystallize. Effectively, what we're doing is melting the chocolate chocolate and then adding some unmelted chocolate to try and help it remember where it came from, and then stirring it vigorously and constantly and exhaustively until it hits 86 degrees Fahrenheit. This might take like 45 minutes, so a way to cool off your chocolate more quickly is to transfer it to a stainless steel bowl. This doesn't retain as much heat as glass and it's going to cool things off more quickly. If even after all this your chocolate is still hot, you can add more seed chocolate, which is both going to cool it further and encourage crystallization. But if that seed chocolate doesn't melt, you might need to return things to the heat for just a few seconds. And I really mean just a few seconds, just enough to melt the seed chocolate. At this point, you don't want things to go above 94 degrees Fahrenheit, otherwise you're starting from scratch. Now, to show you how important temperatures are in this process, I'm going to show you something of a demonstration. As you can see, I've got my chocolate down to about 91 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'm going to perform a temper test, dipping a thin spatula in the chocolate and letting it set for 2 minutes. And as you shall see in the impending close-up, it's pretty set, but it's dull. But this whole time I've been agitating and cooling the chocolate, so when I dip the tester in once more, letting it set for another 2 minutes, you'll see the difference that temperature can make. The chocolate is shiny and pretty and ready to coat our caramels, which we're going to painstakingly dip into the chocolate one at a time. The easiest option is to use a pair of forks because that's going to allow excess to drip away. Just make sure each caramel is thoroughly coated in chocolate and place it on a prepared parchment paper set in a rimmed baking sheet, trying to shake off as much excess chocolate as possible so you don't have a foot on the bottom of your candies. Then, while these guys are still wet, we gotta finish them off with a little bit of flaky salt. I'm pretty sure not salting your caramel is a class 3 misdemeanor in most states. It was after the 20th caramel or so that I wised up and started to use some fondue forks, world renowned for being able to contend with molten chocolate. Now we're just gonna rinse and repeat with the remaining caramels, heating the chocolate as necessary but never bringing it over 94 degrees Fahrenheit, until we have ourselves a completed platter of perfect chocolate covered caramels. As you can see, the chocolate shell is set at room temperature, it's nice and shiny, and it looks like a thing that you might buy at a store. But how do they taste? I wouldn't say that they're indescribable, but they definitely taste like little drops of heaven. They're soft and chewy and stretchy and sweet and salty and just about everything I'd hope they'd be. I would advise against sharing these unless you want unruly neighbors.
This is good. This is really good.
Not too hot, extra chocolate, shaken, not stirred.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the hot cocoa from the Santa Claus. A recipe 1,200 years in the making, so the least that I can do is spend a long weekend on it. So here I have a collection of different types of chocolate and cocoa powders, both of which we're going to utilize in making our hot cocoa. Technically it's not hot cocoa if there's chocolate solids in it, but this is what's going to make it extra chocolatey and velvety and rich. But our bread and butter is going to be the cocoa powder. This is where it really pays off to mix and match your flavors. I've got 3 different kinds of cocoa powder here. Some are earthy and woody and some are light and fruity. Before we make our master blend of these chocolates, we first have to come up with the best way to integrate them into the beverage. And our kitchen producer Kendall taught me an amazing trick where we add a couple tablespoons of heavy cream directly to our cocoa powders and sugars, making a paste. This prevents the dreaded cocoa powder lumps and is how you should prepare your hot cocoa from now until the end of time. Next up, we gotta talk liquids, and generally I like to go with a 50-50 mix of milk and heavy cream. I've got 1 cup of each here that I'm gonna combine in a medium saucepan and over medium-low heat, bring it to not quite a simmer. Not only did Judy say that the hot cocoa was not too hot, but bringing milk to a boil can scald it, changing its consistency and flavor. Once we've reached about 190 degrees Fahrenheit, we're going to kill the heat and add 4 ounces of bittersweet chocolate and our cocoa paste, which is 3 tablespoons each, cocoa powder and sugar, tiny whisk together with a tablespoon or 2 of cream. Tiny whisk thoroughly until everybody is melted and homogeneous. Season with a bit of kosher salt, and optionally you can add a teaspoon each vanilla extract and instant espresso powder, both of which will serve to enhance our chocolate flavor. Once everybody's mixed in, all there is left to do is serve and enjoy this rich, decadent mug of American-style hot chocolate. And don't get me wrong, this is very, very, very good, but it's not I worked on it for 1,200 years good. So I decided to explore some other methods for making hot chocolate as rich and decadent as possible. Starting with the French, we're combining the same 1 cup each heavy cream and whole milk, then we're adding a tablespoon of sugar and a whopping 8 ounces of dark chocolate, killing the heat and stirring until everybody's melted and emulsified, which is going to result in an incredibly rich, thick, deeply chocolatey hot chocolate, which of course we're going to season with a little pinch of kosher kosher salt before ladling into a much more reasonably portioned mug, because this stuff kind of feels like drinking just a cup of melted chocolate, which you're definitely not going to hear me complain about, but it's not what I imagined when I was a kid and I would watch the Santa Claus so much that I broke the VHS. Now, really just for shoots and googles, I'm going to try the Italian method for hot chocolate, which in addition to the 3 tablespoons each sugar and cocoa powder, contains 1 tablespoon of cornstarch in the dry mix. This we're going to add directly into the steaming milk and heavy cream, with the heat on low this time because we need the cornstarch to be cooked for a couple minutes. This plus 4 ounces of dark chocolate is going to make for a devastatingly thick, almost pudding-like hot chocolate, and that's because that's what it is. It's pretty much pudding. You could absolutely eat this stuff with a spoon, you could put it in the fridge and it would set up just like chocolate pudding. And drinking it hot out of a cup is, suffice it to say, a bizarre experience. Whoa, I don't think so, Tim. But there's one more ultra-rich method I want to try, this one hailing from Vienna. This time we're whisking together our 3 tablespoons of sugar with 2 egg yolks. Setting that aside while we dump 8 ounces of dark chocolate into our 1 cup each milk and heavy cream, melting that completely over low heat, and then we're kind of going to make a creme patisserie, bringing stuff back over to the eggs and then slowly ladling the hot mixture into the eggs while whisking constantly, which is going to temper them and prevent them from scrambling when we add them back to the pot, which we're going to cook over medium-low heat for 1 to 2 minutes until we just start to see a little bubblage. And there you have it, a Viennese style hot chocolate. Ultra thick and chocolatey with an added layer of richness from egg yolks. Again, a fun experiment, but not Judy's hot cocoa. The answer there, I think, lies in her James Bond joke, shaken not stirred. So for our ultimate hot cocoa, we're combining 3 tablespoons of sugar with 2 tablespoons each Valrhona and Ghirardelli cocoa powder, a little pinch of instant espresso powder, and a pinch of salt. Tiny whisk until homogeneous, and then it's time to grab our shaker, an insulated thermos with a double screw seal. Before we go any further, I must tell you that this is dangerous. Shaking hot liquids causes gases to expand, which could explode and burn your precious skin, so I must advise you not to try this at home. So in addition to the cocoa powder and sugars, I'm going to add 2.5 ounces of Callebaut dark chocolate wafers, and through a funnel I'm going to pour in my steaming milk and cream. Then I'm going to seal this guy up tight with both its screw top lids and give it a gentle shake. Just enough to melt the chocolate, dissolve the cocoa powder and sugars, and I hope aerate the heavy cream a little bit, which is going to make it nice and thick. Very carefully unscrew the top to slowly release the pressure, and then there's only one way to serve this hot cocoa, in a replica of the actual mug from the Santa Claus film. It's made of sterling silver, it costed $200, and I'm going to be drinking all my beverages out of it from now on. But how is this particular beverage? Well, gotta say, I think we did our job. It's richer and thicker than American hot cocoa, but not as overwhelming as the earlier iterations. It is not too hot, it is extra chocolatey, and it was shaken, not stirred. Happy holidays, guys. Alright, so today we're making Stollen, a Germanic holiday sweet bread, for which we're going to need to make a couple things. First up, marzipan. Into the bowl of a food processor goes 150 grams of almond flour and 180 grams of confectioner's sugar. We're just going to pulse those a few times to make sure that everybody is good and combined. And then, stage left, we are combining 2 teaspoons of almond extract, 1 teaspoon of rose water, and 1 large egg white, which we're going to pour down the feed tube of the processor while it is running, and then process for about 30 seconds until it forms a ball of adult Play-Doh, otherwise known as marzipan. A versatile almond sugar paste, good for everything from Stollen to wedding cake toppers. We're dividing it into 2 4-ounce or 115 gram pieces, both of which we're going to wrap tightly in plastic wrap and fridge until ready to use. These can be made ahead up to 1 week ahead of time. Next up, some candied citrus peel. Now this stuff is a huge pain in the ass to make, and you can buy it at the store, but it's not nearly as good. So depending on how much you value your time, it is a step worth taking. We're going to start by removing the peels from 2 oranges and 4 lemons, making sure to remove any excess fruit flesh and or pith, before thinly slicing, aka julienning, preferably into nice long strips, which are great for cocktails. Once julienned, we're going to bring them over to a pot of boiling water and poach them twice. This step is optional, but it does remove a lot of the peel's inherent bitterness. So basically just boil them for 15 minutes, drain them, and boil them again for another 15 minutes. Draining one last time and setting aside while we get ready to candy. Back in our medium sauce pot, we are combining 1 cup of water with 2 cups of sugar. You'll notice that I'm skipping out on the metric system here because it's not that precise. You're making a sugar syrup of 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. Bring it to a gentle bubble and add the drained peel. Crank the heat all the way down to low and simmer for 45 minutes. Stir it occasionally to make sure that nobody scorches, and remove it from the heat heat when everybody's nice and translucent and soft. Then it's out of the sugar and into the sugar. Grab the still hot fruit and dump it straight into a bowl of granulated sugar, where we're going to toss it around, make sure that everybody's well coated and not clumping together too much. And then using a fine mesh sieve in small batches, we're going to start shaking off all the excess. Kind of helps to swirl it around in a circle like this to make sure that you're getting all the lumps and clumps out. Then we're grabbing each individual piece and placing them on a rack set in a rim baking sheet. There can be a little bit of overlap, but make sure they're not touching too much so that they don't stick. Then we're letting this sit out at room temperature for 24 hours. So yeah, like I said, huge pain, kind of worth it. Next up, we got to make our soaked boozy fruit. So in a resealable container, we're combining 250 grams of raisins, 125 grams of slivered almonds, and 200 grams of our candied peel chopped into bite-sized pieces. Then we're topping that up with 100 ml of our favorite dark rum, mixing everybody together to make sure everybody's evenly boozed, covering and letting soak overnight at least 8 hours. Do your best not to just eat this with a spoon. Either way, I'm not going to judge you. Now finally, it's time to start building our bread. We're going to start by combining 235 ml or 1 cup of lukewarm milk with 25 grams of sugar and 9 grams or about 3 teaspoons of instant yeast. Give this a little tiny whiskin with your brand spanking new Babish tiny whisk and let it sit for about 10 minutes at room temperature until it's nice and foamy. Then in the bowl of a stand mixer, we are combining 480 grams or about 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 175 grams of sugar, 1 teaspoon kosher salt, 1 teaspoon ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ground cardamom, and a traditional optional ingredient, 1 teaspoon of ground mace. Tiny whisk those together until well incorporated, and then it's time to start adding the wet stuff. Starting with our foamy yeasty milk mixture, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 113 grams or 1.5 sticks of softened unsalted butter, the zest of 1 lemon, which is like kind of a semi-wet ingredient, and 1 large egg with 2 large egg yolks. I know I sort of made this out of order, but you can use these reserved egg whites to make your marzipan, or to make a frittata, knowing the amount of calories you're about to eat in Stollen alone. We're fixing dough hooks and mixing this guy on medium speed for 5 to 8 minutes until a smooth, tacky, silky, bouncy ball of dough forms. This is a very enriched, very sweetened dough, so it's going to be very forgiving. Dump that in a lightly oiled bowl, cover with lightly oiled plastic wrap very loosely, and let rest at room temperature for about an hour and a half, during which time it should poof, but not quite double in size. Then it's headed back into the stand mixer, where we're going to introduce it to our boozy fruit and nuts. This is definitely the down and dirty way to get your mixture into the dough, and it's going to be a little messy. The added booze might make the dough a little too soft, so don't be afraid to add a little bit of flour to make things more handleable. Once the fruit and nuts are evenly incorporated, we're turning it out onto a heavily floured work surface, where we're going to divide it into 2 pieces. This recipe makes 2 loaves of Stollen, one for you and one for your neighbor that lent you that extension cord one time, and you've never been quite sure how to repay them. Well, here's your answer. German holiday bread. Lightly flour each of the halves, and then we're going to roll them out into ovals, which are kind of like a tall circle. We want these ovals to be as long as the eventual loaf will be. I've just spent the past half hour trying to write jokes about length, and I can't do it, so it's like, I don't know, it's like 14 inches. Then we're grabbing one of our marzipan balls and rolling it out into a marzipan log, just shy of the same length as our oval, so it fits neatly inside, like so. Then, just like we're wrapping a really weird present, we're going to fold the dough over the top of the marzipan from the sides. Not trying to wrap it too tight or anything, we're just going to fold one side over the other, and then we're going to pinch each end shut, concealing the marzipan from would-be marzipan peepers. Then, using the upper Mars parts of our hands, we're going to sort of press a divot around each side of the marzipan. Then it's time for this guy's final rise, so we're going to lightly grease a couple sheets of plastic wrap, loosely cover the Stollen on some parchment paper set in a rim baking sheet, and rest for an hour and a half at room temperature, after which time, once again, it should have poofed a little bit, but not quite doubled in size. Then it's headed into a 350-degree Fahrenheit, 175-degree Celsius oven for between 35 to 45 minutes or until deeply golden brown and puffed. If you like, you can use a thermometer to see if it's hit 190 degrees Fahrenheit or about 87 degrees Celsius internal. And then it's time to prick. Using a toothpick, we're going to prick the loaves all over. I'm talking like at least 50 times per loaf. This obviously is going to make a whole lot of little holes. Why do we need those holes, you might ask? Well, they're to soak up butter. A stick of molten butter per pricked loaf. Just keep brushing it on there and let it soak up every last buttery drop. Then we've only got one more task before we let these guys cool, and that is to give them a generous dusting of powdered sugar. Do not be shy with the powdered sugar. It should look like they were buried under a light snowfall. Then we're setting these guys aside to let them cool completely at least 4 hours before slicing and serving. All there is left to do is hack it open and take a look at that holiday cross section. Nice, you can sort of see that channel of marzipan running through the center. It's like like a bonus when you're eating it. This stuff, when wrapped up, can last for a solid 2 weeks at room temperature, and it's just really nice to have around during the holidays. You can snack on it, you can toast it up, you can make French toast out of it. In fact, it's so good, if you're not careful, it might end up getting Stollen. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the ill-fated Strata from the family stone, for which we're going to need some bread, 10 slices of hearty white sandwich loaf, which we're going to cut snowflakes out of by virtue of some snowflake-shaped cookie cutters, and cut the remaining scraps into cubes. Messy and scrappy and neat as a pin. And you need both to make this dish, just like, oh, I don't know, a family. Speaking of family, if you plan on making this with them, in order to prevent any more tension, you might want to mise everything out beforehand. That is, measure, chop, and even cook things so you can throw everything together on the day of. And your best friend for this task is the humble rimmed baking sheet, which I'm having a hard time making look cool right now. Ow. It's the perfect tray for pre-measuring and organizing your ingredients so you can put them in the fridge. So we're going to channel our inner Sarah Jessica Parker's character from The Family Stone. Measuring out a half stick of unsalted butter and 1 tablespoon of neutral flavored oil, then thinly slice 14 ounces of tomatoes. I like to keep these on paper towel to prevent tomato drippies. We're also peeling and thinly slicing an onion into rings, separating them and adding them to the tray. Then Sarah Jessica Parker's character, Meredith, that was her name, Meredith. She strikes me as the mushroom wiping type. That is, painstakingly and carefully brushing the dirt off the mushrooms one at a time rather than washing them. You know, the unnecessarily fussy way. So once we've painstakingly polished our mushrooms, we're cleaning the countertop and dumping them right back out for slicing. It's important to slice thinly and evenly to ensure even cooking. Now once sliced, you could cover these with plastic wrap and fridge them with the rest of the ingredients or cook them off now. There's that tablespoon oil we had so much fun measuring before, which we're bringing up to about 450 degrees over medium-high heat. Oh dear, this pan simply won't do. It's too small and the mushroom might fall out and destroy our pristine cooktop. So same procedure this time in a high-walled carbon steel wok, and this time we're going to add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. This is going to help draw moisture out of the mushrooms as they cook, about 5 to 7 minutes or until beginning to brown. Now, after a brief workspace sanitation, we're ready to continue assembling our mise en place. I have here 1 pound of fresh mozzarella that I put in the freezer for 15 minutes before thinly slicing, 5 eggs, 3 cups of whole milk, 1 teaspoon kosher salt, 1 teaspoon oregano, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, 2 ounces of finely grated Parmesan, and a dozen black olives thinly sliced. Now we can begin to cook, or perform a quick workspace sanitation, cover with plastic wrap, put in the fridge, and cook tomorrow when everything's ready to dump and go. Now this might seem a little fastidious, but it's actually a great technique for cooking in general, and it's what Kendall does for me on a weekly basis, so thanks Kendall. Once you're positive that your casserole is 9 by 13 inches, we're going to thoroughly and prolifically lubricate it with butter. That half stick of the unsalted stuff that we stowed with our mise. Then we're laying down all the cubed bread scraps in a single layer, lightly pressing them down before topping them with half our mozzarella torn into little pieces, half of our thin tomato slices, all of our onions, our sauteed and cooled mushrooms that I forgot to put on our tray, the rest of the mozzarella slices, and then we're topping that with our bread and stars. Then each star gets its own tomato slice. Or, you know, close enough. Next up, we need to build the custard that we're going to pour over the top. Combining the 3 cups of whole milk, 5 large eggs, a pinch of salt, and a few twists of freshly ground black pepper, which were not in the recipe, which is why they're not mised. But then we're adding our teaspoon of oregano and 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. Whisking until homogeneous, just as fast as your wrist will allow, and carefully pouring over the assembled casserole, making sure to saturate all the bread on top. Otherwise, it could dry out and burn in the oven. Only 2 steps left to go. That's our 2 ounces of finely grated Parmesan cheese, and our dozen thinly sliced olives, and then this guy's ready to be covered with plastic wrap and fridged overnight. And I know you're asking yourself, is he gonna spill it for comic effect? And the answer is no. Jess loves this movie and she wants to try the real thing. So the next morning, we're very carefully transporting the Strata from the fridge, removing the plastic wrap and baking for 1 to 1.5 hours in a preheated 325-degree Fahrenheit oven, until it's quite possibly the most beautiful Strata you've ever seen. And it springs back lightly when poked and a tester emerges clean. Let it sit for 10 minutes, during which time it's going to hilariously deflate, divvy with a thin spatula, and serve. Now Kendall also loves this movie, and she's the one who found the recipe in the DVD special features of her copy of The Family Stone. And I gotta say, whoever on the cast or crew came up with this one, bravo. Top marks for flavor, texture, appearance, and consider this your cordial invitation to the Clean Plate Club.
Hello?
Is it done?
Yeah, it's done.
Is it crispy?
Yeah, it's crispy. Now let me speak to my son!
Oh, let me hear it.
That crispy enough for you, you twisted f***?
Daddy! Daddy, please.
Preston? Preston, is that you?
You have 1 hour.
No, wait! It's not just his favorite holiday. It's his birthday. Hello?
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the crispiest sandwich from They Kidnapped My Son on Christmas, which Fletcher made a point of showing that he was scooping and toasting to maximize crispiness. After all, it's not every day that your son's life is at stake over a sandwich. So I got myself a big old grocery store style baguette. It looks the part, and it's a pretty lean loaf, so it should toast up very nicely. Just gonna cut myself a sandwich-sized chunk, split it in half, and scoop it out, making sure to reserve what Kendall refers to as the bread meat. It's her favorite part of the bread. I have to admit, I used to squish it into a ball myself and eat it like an apple. Now, this sandwich obviously contains bacon, both for its crisp factor and for its fat, the latter of which, once we've removed the bacon and drained it on paper towels, is going to make an excellent medium for toasting our bread. So I'm brushing down, toasting in the oven, and then pretending that this is TikTok. Then, since the only greens in the fridge were wilted, Fletcher soaks his lettuce in ice water for about 10 minutes to crisp it up. And of course, he opted for frozen chicken tenders baked to a state of crispy completion in the oven. And that's all there is to it. We can start stacking 2 of my biggest chicken tenders, 2 folded over slices of provolone cheese thrown back in the oven to melt, top up with our crispy bacon, our chili and patted dry lettuce, and oddly enough, what look like tomatoes. Not exactly known for their crispness, nor is mayo, but nevertheless, that's what's slathered on top. And that's all there is to it. Top it up and squish it down with some further satisfying noises. Now that is one crispy sandwich. Or is it? As soon as I cut through it, I could tell that every aspect of the sandwich was too rigid and dry, creating a situation not delightfully crispy, but disastrously crunchy. Oh yeah, that sandwich is definitely getting my son killed. So how do we take all the same elements and make them crispy instead of crunchy? Let's start with making our own fried chicken cutlets. Frozen fried chicken being fully cooked is usually pretty dried out by the time it gets crispy. So I've got some chicken breasts here that I'm butterflying and pounding flat, then hitting on both sides with a little bit of kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper so that it can dry brine in the fridge, safeguarding its flavor and moisture content. Next up, to achieve crunchy tomatoes, there's only one direction to go, and that is fried green tomatoes, which we're slicing and likewise lightly salting. And since pretty much everything's getting deep fried, we need to set up a dredge station. I got 1.5 cups of flour that I'm seasoning with 1 teaspoon cayenne, 1 teaspoon smoked paprika, and 1/4 teaspoon each onion powder, white pepper, and garlic powder, plus a pinch of kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. Tiny was to combine and spread out on a wide rimmed plate. Then I've got 2 eggs that I'm going to combine with 1.5 cups of buttermilk to represent the wet stage of our breading, and last but not least, 1.5 cups of finely ground cornmeal. I'm going to blot the excess moisture off the maters and dredge them first in the flour mixture, then in the egg mixture, then in the cornmeal. Ideally utilizing the wet hand dry hand technique, but inevitably giving up on it after 3 or 4 tomatoes. Rinse and repeat until complete, and then for our next 2 breadings, we're simply swapping the cornmeal for panko breadcrumbs. First the chicken, likewise blotted dry, and hit with the same stages of flour, egg, followed by panko. Lastly, to achieve crispy cheese, we could just make a frico, but I think that would just shatter on first bite, unlike a giant super wide mozzarella stick, one that's getting the double flour and egg treatment before being coated in breadcrumbs, then headed straight into the freezer for 20 minutes before deep frying. Speaking of which, I got a whole mess of oil heated up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, where I'm going to start by frying the tomatoes for about 5 minutes until they're floating and golden brown. Next up, the chicken that I'm going to do at 375 because it's so thin. This will ensure a crisp exterior and juicy meat, skim out some of the accumulating particulate, and last but not least, the mozzarella hunks, frying for a frightful 2 to 3 minutes until golden brown and hopefully not exploded. Everybody's getting drained on wire racks and kept warm in a low oven. Last but not least, the problem of the bread. I have a slightly more robust baguette here that I am not going to scoop. What I am going to do is toast it with mayonnaise, placing face down on a well-seasoned rim baking sheet and into a 375 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 5 minutes, weighed down with another sheet. This will hopefully allow the bread to retain some interior moisture while crisping in the oven. And because nobody likes a dry sandwich, not even kidnappers, I'm smearing down on both sides with a mixture of mayo and grain mustard, and then beginning to assemble, starting with our crispy chicken, followed by our crispy bacon, followed by our crispy tomatoes, followed by our crispy hunk of cheese. I realize now that I did not make it appropriately sandwich sized, but it's just gonna have to do. This is a hostage situation. Press, realize that the cheese is just gonna ooze out the sides, soldier forward, and let's hear that crisp. take back what I said before. Now that's a crispy sandwich, even if it is violently bleeding cheese everywhere. The cross-section certainly looks better. It's not every day that you have a triple fried sandwich, but how's it taste? Let's take a big old crispy bite. And it's obviously awesome. It's fried chicken, fried tomatoes, and fried cheese. With that in mind, I'm going to divide it into 4 pieces so that the crew can enjoy it and I won't die.
Hunter? Paxton? Cooper? Byron? Preston? Felipe? Felipe, is that you? No! Wow, this thing's tough. Daddy's here. Daddy's here, Paxton. Merry Christmas, Paxton.
Crispy enough for you?